Have you ever wished to be unshakable? Someone who doesn't care about criticism, rejection, loss, or betrayal. Have you ever dreamed of the day when you will finally stop feeling that silent pain, that anguish that eats you up inside, even when you pretend to be fine on the outside? Maybe you're tired of trying to please everyone, of maintaining an image that requires strength all the time, when in reality, all you want is to rest, just for a moment. We've all felt that burning desire to be immune to the words that cut us down, the rejections that leave us questioning our worth, the betrayals that make us reluctant to trust again. In a world that values stoicism and resilience above all else, vulnerability often feels like a weakness to be conquered rather than a natural part of the human experience. We build walls, create personas, and develop sophisticated defense mechanisms, all hoping that nothing will ever hurt us again. But let me tell you something that perhaps no one has dared to say. As long as you try to avoid pain, it will continue to control you. As long as you try to numb yourself, to protect yourself, to hide, you will remain a hostage to everything around you, to the words that hurt you, to the actions that disappoint you, to the silences that kill you inside. This paradox is the first truth we must confront. In trying to become untouchable, we make ourselves more vulnerable to suffering. This is not weakness. This is the reality for most people. The difference is that some pretend better than others. Some have mastered the art of appearing invincible while crumbling inside. Others wear their pain like armor, believing that if they anticipate hurt, they can somehow neutralize its impact. But both approaches stem from the same misconception, that becoming untouchable means feeling nothing at all. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in depth psychology, offered a different perspective when he said that we are not what happens to us, but what we choose to become, and that's where the key lies. It's not about shielding yourself from the world. It's not about becoming cold, indifferent, or untouchable. It's about integrating. It's about bringing to light everything that currently affects you in the dark. Because true strength is not the absence of pain, but the full awareness of who you are, even when you are bleeding. In Jung's view, the path to emotional resilience isn't paved with denial or avoidance. It's forged through the courageous act of facing our shadows, acknowledging our wounds, and integrating the parts of ourselves we've long rejected. This is the journey of individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. If you've made it this far in reading this essay, it's not by chance. These words are for you who are tired of hurting yourself with everything and everyone. It's for you who feel that you are always at an emotional disadvantage, as if other people have a power over you that you don't understand. I want to show you that it doesn't have to be this way, but for that, you will have to face some truths that may hurt, and perhaps for the first time, this pain will set you free. The origin of our pain. Let's get started with a fundamental question. What hurts us? You believe that what hurts you is out there. In the actions of others, in poorly chosen words, in the abandonments you have suffered, in the betrayals you did not expect. When someone criticizes you, your immediate reaction is to blame them for your pain. When a relationship ends, you tell yourself that the other person is responsible for your suffering. When a friend forgets your birthday, you interpret it as proof that you don't matter. but the truth is brutal and liberating all at once. None of this has the power to hurt you unless there is already an open wound inside you. What hurts you is not what others do to you, it is what these experiences activate within you. It is the story you tell yourself about it. It is the old trauma that has never been addressed. It is the emptiness you disguise with strength, with pride, with that desperate need to seem well adjusted. Consider this: two people can experience the same rejection, yet one will recover quickly, while the other will spiral into depression. Two people can be criticized in the same way, yet one will take it as useful feedback while the other will feel devastated. Two people can be betrayed, yet one will learn from the experience and move on, while the other will close themselves off from love forever. Why this difference? Jung shows us that the pain we feel in the face of the external world is merely a reflection of what has not yet been integrated into our internal world. That is why some people can go through devastating situations and still maintain clarity, while others crumble in the face of a simple comment. It is not about what happens, it is about where it hits you. Think of it like this: if you have a deep wound on your arm that hasn't properly healed, even the lightest touch can cause excruciating pain. But if your arm is healthy, even a stronger impact might be uncomfortable, but not unbearable. Our emotional wounds work the same way. When certain experiences trigger old pain that we haven't processed, we react not to the present situation, but to the accumulated suffering of our past. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. You still suffer so much because on some level you believe you can control how the world should treat you. You are still trying to be good enough, smart enough, strong enough, understanding enough, as if that guarantees that no one will hurt you. You believe that if you could just get everything right, your appearance, your work, your relationships, your behavior, then finally you would be safe from pain. But control is an illusion, and as long as you cling to it, you live in constant tension, trying to predict the unpredictable, trying to avoid the inevitable. The world doesn't follow our rules. People don't act according to our expectations. Life itself is inherently unpredictable, and the sooner we accept this fundamental uncertainty, the sooner we can begin to truly live instead of merely surviving. Do you want to stop suffering? Then stop protecting yourself from suffering. What you need is not more control, but more awareness. As long as you believe that people need to change for you to stop feeling pain, you will remain enslaved by the actions of others. Your freedom begins the moment you understand that everything that comes from outside only has power if it finds an echo within you. This doesn't mean that you should tolerate abuse or that you shouldn't set boundaries. On the contrary, when you understand the true source of your pain, you become more discerning about who and what you allow in your life. But you do so not out of fear of being hurt, but out of a deep respect for yourself and a clear understanding of your worth. The battlefield of the unconscious. And this is exactly where the true battlefield lies, the unconscious. What you do not see, do not understand, and do not master, masters you. The unconscious isn't just some abstract concept from psychology, textbooks. It's a living force within us, directing our reactions, influencing our decisions, and often sabotaging our conscious intentions. The biggest lie you've been told is that you are in control of your life. Wake up, because you're not, at least not as long as you continue living on autopilot, reacting without knowing why, feeling without understanding where it comes from, and making decisions that you later sabotage. Carl Jung made this clear when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is exactly what is happening to you right now. Have you ever wondered why you keep finding yourself in the same painful situations despite your best intentions? Why do certain patterns repeat themselves in your life, no matter how hard you try to break them? Why do you react disproportionately to certain triggers that others barely notice? This is the unconscious at work, replaying old scripts that you haven't yet recognized or resolved. The pain you feel, the anger that explodes out of nowhere, the sadness that invades you without explanation, none of this is random. They are messages coming from parts of you that have been forgotten, ignored, or repressed. Jung referred to this dark territory as the unconscious, and it is not just a cloud of vague thoughts. It is an active force, an entire system of memories, trauma, desires, and fears that you do not want to face, but that continue to decide what you feel and how you act. Consider how many times you've said or done something in the heat of the moment and later wondered, where did that come from? Or how often you've made the same mistake, knowing it was a mistake, yet feeling powerless to stop yourself. This is the unconscious asserting itself, like an invisible hand guiding you toward familiar patterns, even when your conscious mind wants to go in a different direction. You wonder why certain words destroy you while other people don't care, because those words touch sensitive points within you that are still alive, and if they are alive, it is because you have never confronted them. You have only pushed them under the psychological rug, and now you keep tripping over them. Jung said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." And what have you been doing? Judging yourself, repressing yourself, and silencing yourself as if that would solve anything. The truth is that the unconscious does not disappear just because you ignore it. It only finds more dangerous ways to manifest, in toxic relationships that you repeat, in patterns of self-sabotage that you cannot break, in anxieties and fears that arise when everything seems to be going well. This is not bad luck. It is your unconscious trying to wake you up, but you insist on sleeping. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we repress or deny because they don't fit with our conscious self-image. The shadow isn't necessarily evil, it simply contains aspects of our personality that we've deemed unacceptable, often based on societal or familial conditioning. But the shadow doesn't disappear when we disown it. It simply operates from the unconscious, influencing our behavior in ways we don't recognize. Do you want to be someone who is no longer hurt? Then stop running away from what is inside you, because as long as you do not know your unconscious, you will be a puppet of your emotions. And the more you try to protect yourself from external pain, the more vulnerable you become to internal pain. But there is a way out, and it is not in defending yourself, it is in integrating yourself, because becoming untouchable is not an act of resistance, it is an act of deep knowledge. It's about shining a light into the darkest corners of your psyche, facing what you find there with compassion rather than judgment, and gradually incorporating these shadow aspects into your conscious identity. This process isn't easy. It requires the courage to confront parts of yourself that you've spent a lifetime avoiding. It demands honesty, humility, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. But it's the only path to true psychological freedom. To becoming someone who can face life's challenges with integrity and resilience rather than fragility and defensiveness. True strength, integration, not armor. What does it truly mean to be someone who is unshaken, and why does this strength not come from armor but from acceptance? This is the question we must explore if we want to understand the nature of genuine emotional resilience. Most people believe that the only way to avoid getting hurt is by closing themselves off. They build walls, create masks, develop emotional armor, and pretend that nothing affects them. They say, "I don't care anymore. I couldn't care less. Nothing gets to me." But inside, they continue to bleed. They keep corroding, because the problem was never about feeling. The problem is not knowing what you are feeling and why, and this only happens to those who do not yet know themselves. Consider the person who, after being hurt in love, declares that they'll never open their heart again. They might appear strong, independent, even intimidating in their self-sufficiency, but beneath this facade often lies a profound fear, not just of being hurt again, but of confronting the vulnerability that is an inevitable part of deep connection. They haven't become stronger, they've merely become more defended. And while these defenses might prevent new wounds, they also prevent healing, growth, and the very intimacy they secretly crave. Jung was precise when he stated, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but when touching a human soul, be just another human soul. And that human soul you insist on hiding behind a strong, invulnerable, controlled character? It is screaming to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be integrated into your conscious identity rather than relegated to the shadows." Becoming emotionally strong has nothing to do with being cold. It has nothing to do with ignoring pain, avoiding conflict, or pretending not to care. It has to do with integrating, with accepting, with bringing to light everything you have buried in the dark. You do not become untouchable by creating a barrier between yourself and the world. You become untouchable when you realize that no one can touch what has already been embraced within you. This is the profound paradox at the heart of emotional resilience. To become strong, you must first acknowledge your weakness. To become invulnerable, you must first accept your vulnerability. To become whole, you must first recognize your brokenness. When you integrate your shadows, your fears, your flaws, and your insecurities, you stop reacting to everything. You observe, you choose. You are no longer an emotional puppet, and that is true freedom. Jung called this individuation. The process of becoming who you are, not what others expect of you, not what you thought you should be to be accepted, but what emerges from within, from the meeting of light and shadow, between ego and unconscious. Individuation is not a process of perfection, Jung said, but of integration. You do not need to become a better person, you just need to become whole. Wholeness includes your strength and your weakness, your courage and your fear, your wisdom and your foolishness. It embraces all the contradictions that make you human, and in this embrace, something remarkable happens. The aspects of yourself that once seemed like vulnerabilities become sources of genuine strength. Consider, for example, the sensitivity that you might have always viewed as a weakness. When integrated rather than denied, this same sensitivity can become the foundation for profound empathy, deep connection, and creative expression. The fear that once paralyzed you can, when acknowledged, transform into wise caution and discernment. Even your anger, when recognized and channeled consciously, can become a powerful force for setting boundaries and fighting injustice. And here is the secret that no one told you. The more you run from pain, the more it chases you. The more you try not to be affected, the more fragile you become. But when you face your wounds, when you accept who you are, with all that is beautiful and ugly, noble and shameful, nothing outside has the power to dismantle you. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain. It means that pain no longer has the power to define you, to control you, to break you. You can feel it fully, knowing that it is part of your human experience, but not the totality of who you are. And in this acceptance, there is a profound liberation. However, this path requires courage. Courage to look within, courage to abandon the masks, courage to feel, because it is precisely in pain that the key to transformation is hidden. And that transformation begins with a radical act of self-honesty. The transformative power of suffering. You learned to hate pain since you were little. You were taught that suffering is a sign of weakness, that crying is a waste of time, that feeling too much makes you vulnerable. And so you began to run, to avoid, to deny. But the more you flee from suffering, the more it chases you. And the worst part? It changes form. It disguises itself as anxiety, anger, apathy, boredom, and self-destructive impulses that you don't even understand where they come from. Society reinforces this aversion to pain at every turn. We're bombarded with messages promising quick fixes, instant relief, and painless solutions. Take this pill and you won't feel sad. Buy this product and you'll be happy. Follow this 5-step plan and you'll never suffer again. But beneath these promises lies a profound misunderstanding of the role of suffering in human growth. Ignored pain does not disappear. It just digs tunnels inside you until one day, without warning, everything collapses. The depression that seems to come out of nowhere, the panic attack that strikes in the middle of a normal day, the explosive rage that ruins relationships. These are often the eruptions of pain that have been buried rather than processed, denied rather than integrated. Jung saw suffering in a completely different way. He believed that pain was the messenger of the soul, the alarm of the unconscious, the language that the self, what you are in your entirety, uses to get your attention. He said, "Depression is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't push her away. Invite her to sit down, offer her a coffee, and listen to what she has to say. But you don't listen. You silence yourself, distract yourself, keep yourself busy, and numb yourself. You do everything to avoid looking at what matters." What is this pain trying to show you? The truth is that suffering only hurts so much because you are still at war with yourself. There is still a part of you wanting to grow and another part wanting to keep everything as it is. There is something inside you that cries out for transformation, but your ego, accustomed to control, tries to suffocate that call. And it is in this friction that pain is born. Jung described the ego as just one part of the total psyche, the part that identifies as I, that wants to maintain control and stability. But the self, which Jung saw as the center and totality of the entire psyche, often has different plans. The self pushes for growth, for integration, for the fulfillment of our unique potential. And when the ego resists this call, psychological suffering ensues, because change hurts, growth hurts, letting go of old beliefs, cutting toxic ties, allowing what no longer serves you to die. All of this is a mourning, an internal process of death and rebirth. But it is precisely in this space of ruin that something new can be born. Because when everything in you is deconstructed, when certainties crumble, when pain lays bare your vulnerability, you can finally see who you are, without the layers of protection, without the performance, without the mask. Think of the most significant transformations in your life. Didn't they often emerge from periods of intense suffering? The relationship breakdown that forced you to discover your independence, the career failure that led you to find your true calling, the illness that taught you the value of health, the loss that showed you what truly matters. These weren't just painful episodes to be endured, they were catalysts for profound change. And at that exact point, suffering becomes sacred because it brings you to your knees before the only thing that can set you free, yourself. Jung knew this. He understood that suffering is not a failure of the system. It is part of the process. Pain is not the end of the road. It is the beginning of the journey towards individuation. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or glorify it for its own sake. It means that when suffering inevitably comes, as it does in every human life, we can approach it differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we can ask, "What is this trying to teach me? What part of myself am I being called to confront and integrate? What transformation is wanting to take place?" The problem is that most people give up before crossing that dark valley. They flee, they distract themselves, they return to the surface, but not you. If you have made it this far in this essay, it is because you are ready to cross. You are ready to face the discomfort of self-knowledge, to endure the pain of growth, to embrace the uncertainty of transformation. You are ready to turn your suffering from an enemy into an ally on your journey toward wholeness. The journey of individuation. It's getting deeper now. Few people dare to begin the journey of individuation, and even fewer dare to complete it, because this path does not promise comfort, does not offer guarantees, does not protect your ego. It destroys it. In its place, something more authentic, more integrated, and ultimately more powerful emerges. But first, you must be willing to let go of who you thought you were. Jung referred to individuation as a process of becoming who you are, but this means, above all, unlearning what you think you are, and that hurts more than any external rejection, because you start to realize that much of what defined you until now was an illusion. The roles you played, the identities you adopted, the stories you told yourself, these were not your essence, but your adaptations, your survival strategies, your attempts to find acceptance and security in an uncertain world. You are not your achievements. You are not your traumas. You are not the image you constructed to be loved, respected, or admired. All of this was what you created to survive. But surviving is not living, and individuation is life's call beyond survival. It is when the unconscious begins to push everything that has been repressed, hidden, and distorted to the surface. This often begins with a crisis, what Jung called the night sea journey, or what others might call a diet of the soul. Sometimes it's triggered by an external event, a loss, a failure, an illness. Other times it comes as a creeping sense of meaninglessness or emptiness, even when everything in your external life seems fine. This is the call to individuation, and it rarely comes as a gentle invitation. It comes as a disruption, a breakdown, a shattering of what was. Individuation requires the dissolution of the persona, Jung wrote, for it is merely a mask of collective convenience. The persona is the face we show to the world, the social mask we wear to fit in, to meet expectations, to belong. It's not inherently bad. We all need to adapt to social realities. But when we mistake the persona for our true self, when we believe we are nothing more than the roles we play, we suffer. And the path of individuation demands that we differentiate between who we truly are and the masks we wear. In other words, you will need to tear off your skin to discover what lies beneath. This metaphorical shedding is painful. It involves confronting the ways you've betrayed yourself to please others, the authentic desires you've suppressed to maintain approval, and the parts of your nature you've denied to fit into a particular mold. It means facing the fact that much of what you thought was essential to your identity was actually constructed, conditional, and ultimately limiting. It is in this process that you begin to become untouchable, not because nothing affects you anymore, but because you have already gone through the fire. You have faced your monsters, you have looked into the eyes of your shame, your neediness, your anger, and said, "I see you, and you no longer control me." This is not suppression or denial, it's conscious integration. It's bringing what was unconscious into consciousness, where it can be transformed rather than acted out blindly. Jung introduced the concept of active imagination as a method for engaging with the unconscious, a way of dialoguing with the parts of ourselves that we've disowned or failed to recognize. Through this practice, we can begin to build a relationship with our shadow aspects rather than being controlled by them from the unconscious. This is not easy work. It requires patience, curiosity, and a willingness to be surprised by what emerges from within us. But it is through this engagement that we gradually become more whole. It is this internal clarity, this lucidity in the face of your darkness, that gives you a strength that does not depend on approval, recognition, or control. You no longer need to be loved by everyone. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need to appear strong because you know who you are, and no one can take that away from you. True emotional armor is not a shell, it is a core. It is the integration of all your parts into a center of consciousness that remains unshaken in the face of storms. You may feel pain, but it does not break you. You may be hurt, but you do not lose yourself, because you have stopped being reactive and have become whole. You have stopped living on the surface and have begun to inhabit the depths. This is what Jung meant by the self, not the ego, which is just one part of the psyche, but the organizing center of the entire personality, conscious and unconscious. The self emerges as we progress on the path of individuation, providing an inner stability that isn't dependent on external circumstances. It's a source of guidance and wisdom that transcends the limited perspective of the ego. However, this depth comes at a price: loneliness. Not because you will be alone, but because few people can accompany you on this journey. Most are still trapped on the surface, in masks, in the fear of feeling. And when you begin to free yourself, you inevitably distance yourself. But this distancing is not rejection, it is maturation. You do not distance yourself out of pride. You distance yourself because you no longer fit where you once hid. This is the paradox of individuation. As you become more authentically yourself, you may find that you relate differently to the collective. Some relationships may fall away. Some social circles may no longer resonate with you. Some conversations may start to feel shallow or draining. This can be painful and disorienting. But alongside this loss comes a profound gain: the ability to connect with others from a place of genuine authenticity rather than persona-driven performance. And this brings us to the final point of this journey: consciousness as a shield, because it is not strength that protects you, it is clarity. It is the ability to see clearly both yourself and the world around you, without the distortions of projection, denial, or unconscious reactivity. This is what we will discuss in the final part of our exploration. Consciousness, the ultimate shield. Now that you've made it this far, there is something that needs to be said very clearly. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will shield you from external suffering if you remain unconscious of what happens within you. The words will continue to hurt, the rejections will continue to sting, the losses will keep bringing you down until you awaken. And awakening is not a magical event, it is a daily choice. It is looking within, even when it hurts. It is taking responsibility for everything you feel without blaming others, the past, or fate anymore. Consciousness is not just awareness. It's a particular quality of awareness that Jung described as the ability to reflect on our experiences rather than merely being submerged in them. It's the difference between being angry and knowing that you're angry, between feeling rejected and understanding why rejection triggers such intense pain for you, between acting out old patterns and recognizing them as they arise. This kind of consciousness doesn't come naturally. Our default state is to be identified with our emotions, to believe our thoughts without question, to act from unconscious programming without realizing we're doing so. Developing consciousness requires intention, practice, and often guidance. It involves cultivating the observer within, the part of you that can step back from experience and witness it without being completely consumed by it. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists, what you accept transforms." You have spent your whole life resisting the fear of not being enough, the emptiness of rejection, the pain of loneliness, the anguish of not feeling seen. But what did you do with that? You hid, you silenced yourself, you tried to control everything, you tried to be perfect, you tried to be strong. And all of this has brought you here, exhausted, tired of fighting against the world and against yourself. All of your strategies for avoiding pain have failed because they were based on resistance. You resisted vulnerability, so it grew stronger in your unconscious. You resisted sadness, so it transformed into depression. You resisted anger, so it emerged as passive aggression or self-destructive behavior. You resisted your shadows, so they began to control you from the darkness. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean you approve of what has happened to you or that you won't work to change what can be changed. It means you stop denying reality. You stop pretending that you're not hurt when you are. You stop acting as if you don't have needs when you do. You stop rejecting parts of yourself because they don't fit your ideal image. But now you know, true emotional immunity is not hardness. It is clarity. It is not about creating armor, it is about expanding your awareness. Because when you understand your triggers, your patterns, your wounds, the actions of others lose the power to destroy you. You still feel, but you don't drown. You still suffer, but you don't lose yourself. And that changes everything. Imagine someone criticizes you in a way that would once have sent you spiraling. With this new consciousness, you might still feel the initial sting, but you also recognize, this criticism is triggering my old fear of not being good enough, which originated when my parent constantly found fault with my efforts as a child. This recognition doesn't make the feeling disappear, but it gives you space around it. You can feel it without being defined by it. You can respond to the present situation rather than reacting to old wounds. This is what Jung meant by making the unconscious conscious. It's not about analyzing yourself endlessly or dwelling in the past. It's about bringing light to the dark corners of your psyche so that you're no longer controlled by what lurks there. It's about becoming the author of your story rather than a character driven by forces you don't understand. What shields you is not protecting yourself from life, it is diving into it deeply. Those who live on the surface get hurt by any wave. Those who dive know that there is silence, stability, and power down below. And that is where you're headed. When you dive beneath the surface of your experience, beneath the immediate reactions, the habitual patterns, the conditioned responses, you discover a depth of being that remains constant amidst the changing currents of life. Jung called this the self, the organizing center of the entire psyche that transcends the limited perspective of the ego. Others might call it your essence, your core, your true nature. Whatever name we give it, this deeper dimension of who you are cannot be threatened by external events in the way that your ego can. And when you start to live from that place of integration, presence, acceptance, the world may try to knock you down, but it no longer finds where to hit you. Not because you've become numb or disconnected, but because you've become whole. The parts of you that were once vulnerable to attack, the unacknowledged insecurities, the denied fears, the repressed pain, have been brought into consciousness and integrated into your sense of self. There is nothing left to hide, nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove. This is the ultimate paradox of becoming untouchable. It doesn't come from building impenetrable walls, but from having nothing to hide. It doesn't come from avoiding vulnerability, but from embracing it so fully that it transforms into strength. It doesn't come from controlling life, but from surrendering to it while maintaining your center. If this essay has touched you in some way, if something within you has awakened, write here in the comments, "I choose awareness." Let's start a movement of people who no longer want to survive by pretending to be strong, but to live with the truth. Because the truth, as painful as it sometimes is the only path to genuine freedom. And remember, this is just the beginning. Real transformation doesn't happen through reading or understanding alone. It happens through consistent practice, through daily choices to be conscious rather than reactive, to face your shadows rather than project them, to integrate rather than defend. It's a lifelong journey, but every step brings you closer to that unshakable center within yourself, the place from which you can engage with life fully, freely, and fearlessly.